Good morning, students. This is Asha, your social science teacher. So hope you all remember what we studied yesterday. We started chapter 1 in history, how, when and where, and we did a bit of introduction about what history is, how history is divided into periods. Then we studied how dates are important in history, and then we studied about the James Mill and his periodization, how he periodized Indian history. Today we'll study a bit more about James Mill, colonial period, and sources of modern history, like sources to study modern history. What are the sources through which we can study modern history? So, as we studied yesterday, James Mill was a Scottish philosopher who believed that all ancient societies were at lower level of civilization. According to his telling of history, before British came to India, Hindu and Muslim despots ruled country. Religious intolerance, caste taboos, and superstitious practices dominated social life. And according to him, British rule could civilize India. To do this, it was necessary to introduce European manners, art, institution, laws in India. In fact, James Mill suggested that British should conquer all the territories in India to ensure the enlightenment and the happiness of Indian people. For India was not capable of progress without British help. This was his idea. He believed all Asians are uncivilized, and it's the prime motive of Europeans, especially Britishers, to civilize India. In his idea of history, British rule represented all the forces of progress and civilization. The period before British rule was one of darkness, which many historians refuse to accept that Indian history had a period of darkness before Britishers came to India. But James Mill believed, yes, Indian history period was of darkness before Britishers came to India. Yesterday we were discussing James Mill periodization of Indian history into Hindu, Muslim and British. Many Indian historians refuse to accept this, right? And especially the British form, because in all the periodization, people who lived in India were varied, and we cannot accept this period as British. In place of British, they gave a name colonial. They prefer calling that time frame 18th century till 1947 as colonial period. So what exactly colonial period is? It is when the subjugation of one country by another leads to kinds of political, economic, social, cultural changes. That process is known as colonial. So what happened exactly in colonial time frame? The country which is more powerful take up control of less powerful country and start governing that particular country and start using its resources for its own benefit. So India was a colony of Britain. India was governed by Britain, and India's resources were used by Britain for their own benefit. Not only India was colony, but at that time France, Germany, Spain, Holland, all these powers from West had made colonies all over the world. They were governing other country and using their resources. So it was a whole era where the colonies were formed in faraway nation. So historians prefer calling this period as colonial period. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, which is sources of modern history. When we study modern history, we do have many sources to study them, right? We'll move on to them. When we study history, modern history, the sources can be divided into two categories. One is primary source and the second is secondary source. In primary source, it's archaeological sources, original documents, surveys and census, newspaper, magazine. All this come under primary sources. And the secondary sources include articles, reviews, books, diaries, biographies, autobiographies. All this come under secondary sources. So what is the difference between primary and secondary sources? Primary sources are the sources which give you a first-hand information. Like if you see any archaeological document or archaeological building, it gives you a first-hand information. And if you see an original document, that's give you a first-hand information. Whereas if you go for an article, review, diary, biography, what they are the information interpretation. They are the interpretation. So the main source of information for article is also a primary source. The primary source is interpreted in a different manner and then it becomes a secondary source. So now we'll study each of the source one by one. So the primary source, the first is archaeological sources. Materials, building, their remains found in excavation form a part of archaeological sources. Coins also come in this category. In medieval period you must have seen coins and on that it was engraved which ruler has issued that particular coin and from which year to which year he was ruling. So coins also give a great deal of information. But for modern history, archival sources are much more useful than archaeological source. So here we need to understand what is archival source. Archives are the big huge libraries where old documents are kept. Britishers built many national archive and museums, National Museum, to preserve these documents and they give great deal of information. National Archive building came up in 1920s in India and it is very near to Viceregal Palace or you can say Rashtrapati Bhavan. Now move on to next source which is original document. What all come under this? Government reports, orders, official correspondence may be included in this category of original documents. They provide first-hand information about any leading issues. They are well preserved in archives and libraries. So whatever happened, government official used to prepare a report. They used to prepare office memos, report. All these give a first-hand information. Like Britishers set up mini record room attached to all administrative institution. Whatever the administrative institutions were, they all had attached record rooms. Even the village tehsildar office, the collectorate, the commissioner office, the provincial secretariat, the law courts, all these offices had their record rooms to preserve the documents. Specialized institutions like archives and museums were also established to preserve important documents. They believed in keeping all these documents and preserving them. Right? Here you can see British believed that by preserving official document, it would be easier for them or any other person to know about the decision taken in past. If we are studying history, so if all these documents are available, it will be easier for us to understand why and how they took this decision. One can study the notes and reports that were prepared in past. Their copies may be prepared and used in present time. And if we face the same situation in today's scenario, what all decision they took can help us. And they also set up many record rooms. And as in grade 7 you studied about scribes. Scribes were the people who used to copy documents. In the same way in British period, they were specialized people who did the job of copying, and they were calligraphists. They were the people who were specialized in art of beautiful handwriting. They had beautiful handwritings and they used to copy the original documents. So calligraphy is the one which came into existence during British era. Now let's move on to the next, which is surveys and census. From time to time, British conducted surveys to demark territories and fixed land revenue. British came as a trader, and then they conquered one territory, then another, and slowly and gradually they conquered whole of India. And they have to fix land revenue. And in order to fix the land revenue, they should know exactly how much the land is. So they conducted a lot of surveys and census. Census is something which is done after every 10 years. The first time the census was started in 1881 by Britishers only. And there were many surveys which they conducted. They wanted to know about, according to them, if you want to govern a country, you should know about it in detail. They conducted many botanical surveys, geological surveys. Many surveys were conducted by them, as well as census was done by them to know more about this country. Next source is newspaper and magazines. Newspaper and magazines are also a very important source of information. They provide news and reflect public opinion. If you read a newspaper, you get to know about the public opinion, what people thought. That comes in your mind. Pamphlets are also an important source of information. Personal letter, significant as they reveal. So all this information are first-hand information which we get from here. Newspaper. So children, let's recap today's work. We studied what exactly colonial period meant. We studied about James Mill, what was his views on India. Then we studied what is colonial and why British period is called colonial period. The next, sources of modern history, by which all sources we study modern history. And there are two types of sources, primary source and secondary source. We discussed all the primary sources, archaeological sources, original documents, surveys, newspapers, magazines. And tomorrow we'll be discussing secondary sources. What all are secondary sources? And we will be discussing book exercises as well. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you.